Hello my friends on the internet, and welcome back to the lore of every single boss in Black Myth Wukong. In this video, we'll be focusing on the bosses of Chapter 4, but before we get into it, as is apparently my tradition around these parts, I have a few disclaimers to go over. First and foremost, I know these videos have been taking me a while to upload, with this Chapter 4 video taking longer than most of the others. But that was actually because, as you might have noticed, a new Zelda game came out. I'm also a huge Zelda fan, so I had to dedicate at least some time to playing the game on the channel. And on that note, if you're a fan of Zelda, you should drop into a stream sometime, or check out my other Zelda videos on the channel. Second, I have a correction to make to the previous video once again, and that is regarding the name of the Yin Tiger. I mistakenly thought his name was Yin Tiger because the tiger is oftentimes portrayed as the representation of the universal concept of Yin, or the earth. This is incorrect, however, and his name Yin simply refers to his finishing position as third in the zodiac race that I talked about in the previous video. Similarly, the name Chen in Chen Long refers to his fifth position. Shen Monkey means 9th, and Zhu Dog means 11th. The third disclaimer is that this chapter features several Yaoguai chiefs that are not actually bosses, known as the Spider Sisters. Well, the second sister is a boss, but they all cumulatively have enough lore amongst themselves that I decided I want to dedicate yet another separate video just to them and the history of the Chu royalty. So you'll want to make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already to stick around for that. The fourth and final disclaimer is that if you guys want to see a collaboration between Afro and myself regarding any game series we have in common in the future, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments below. Oh, and tell him Bandit says hi and that I hope he's having fun with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Okay, with all the disclaimers out of the way, let's dive into the bosses of Chapter 4, called Rosy Cheeks, Gray Hair. As always, we will begin with the disconnected bosses first, and then use one main boss in particular to explain all the others, and in this case, I think the obvious choice would be the little piggy himself, Jubaja. We will also of course be omitting the dragon Yellow Long and the frog Ba Liko Ba for their own videos to be released after we're done with the bosses of the game. And once again, make sure you're subscribed. You can always change your mind later. First up, just like most of the other chapters, this one also has a major veggie guai to fight that starts out stuck in the ground. In Chapter 4, it's the Fungi Woman. Or is it Fun Guy Woman? I mean, she looks like a fun guy. Anyway, unfortunately, we don't actually have a journal entry for this boss in particular, but we do have an entry regarding the lesser fungi guais, known as the Fungalings, which I can only assume is related. The story goes that there was once a widow and her young daughter who tried very hard to make ends meet in order to, afford to live in their house, which led to the young girl giving up a normal childhood with friends and school and whatnot in order to work around said house. In the ruins of their woodshed, there sprouted a strange but very pretty mushroom, who became the girl's only friend that she would tell all her worries and desires to. One day, the mother became very sick and was forced to try to sell her property for money in order to afford medicine and live. Her neighbor was interested in buying her house, but tried to scalp her on the price, knowing she was desperate. Long story short, the young girl would often go into the woodshed to cry and express all of her anxieties regarding her mother and the house, all of which the mushroom heard. And soon after, there were many mushrooms covering the whole property. So the neighbor ordered his servants to go in and clear them all off. And wouldn't you know it, turns out the mushrooms were actually Yaoguais who killed the neighbor and his servants and helped the mother and daughter pack and flee into the mountains. Where does the Fungi Woman come into the story, you ask? Well, it's not confirmed, but I do think the fact that it's related to the Fungalings and is specifically a woman is important. And this is just a theory, but it's possible that this implies that the sickly mother, who wasn't able to actually sell her house or make any money or get any medicine before leaving her village and disappearing in the mountains with the Yaoguais and her daughter, ended up passing away. After which the fungi could have resurrected her as a Yaoguai chief. That, or perhaps the fungi bonded with her in order to help heal her illness in the only way they could. Either way, in summary, it's possible that the girl's mother is the Fungi Woman. And it's also possible that none of this is true, but I digress. Up next, let's talk about the Commander Beetle who serves the Violet Spider. Now, this guy's origins are shrouded in mystery as he doesn't appear in the novel, and the game simply claims that he used to be an Imperial Guard before being cursed into a Beetle Yaoguai form. But regardless of where he came from, he seems to be a pretty stand-up guy, I'm not gonna lie. He loved training his underlings and passing on knowledge to them, such as to a Captain Beetle who was struggling with being respected by his troops. The commander's advice was to be a man worthy of respect instead of trying so hard to force it, which is just solid advice. He also happened upon an unnamed young man who we will call Joe for the time being, who served a government official who hated Joe. One day, this official heard of a nearby abandoned village that housed a powerful Yaoguai, unbeknownst to them the Beetle Commander, and sent Joe out there to die. Joe knew this, but went anyway because he was a prideful sort, and lo and behold happened upon the Commander Beetle when he was practicing his swordplay indoors in a building trying to take shelter for the night. The Beetle Commander recognized his swordplay and accurately guessed that he served a government official, which heavily implies that the Commander Beetle might have come from the same place that Joe did, or at least has ties to it. Anyway, Joe ends up venting his woes to the Commander, who was going to eat him but decided not to upon hearing the woes of Joe, after which the Commander trains Joe until the morning light, then leaves him with a piece of advice. A man should carve his own path, then leaves laughing heartily. Honestly, what a guy. Kind of sad that we have to kill him in the game, but it appears that he never enjoyed actually being a Yaoguai, and even asks you to end his life when you fight him, and appears relieved when he finally does pass on, so maybe we did him a favor, in a way? Next up would be the distinguished Elder Armorworm, a true gentleman of a worm that's encountered by the Destined One in the Webbed Hollow. The Elder Worm originated from an egg that originated from atop Mount Kunlun, which is a mythological and geographical location in Chinese mythology and the Tibetan Plateau that has much to do with various mythological tales. In this case, 2 ancient eggs were mysteriously cast down into the mortal realm from atop the mountain, which is to say, from heaven. But because the mortal world had less overall will than that of the celestial world, neither of the eggs grew to their fullest potentials, yet both still had special abilities. One of the eggs was used apparently to redeem the guilty, but the other egg was taken and hidden away by someone who saw potential in it. As it grew in a secret place, it eventually turned into the Elder Armorworm that we see in the game and laid eggs. Lots of eggs. In fact, the Elder is the mother of all lesser armor worms that we see all throughout the chapter. However, there is another much more sinister ability that the Elder Worm's eggs possess, and it's only unlocked if the eggs are ingested instead of allowed to hatch on their own. If they are ingested, then the armor worm larvae will eat the insides of its consumer, then transform them into a monstrous and very powerful Yaoguai, which is actually something that has an impact on another boss in this chapter, the Daoist known as Me. No, not me. Me is actually a character that the Destined One meets before they officially become a Yaoguai chief boss. And if you're not careful, you'll miss his boss encounter entirely and be locked out of the fight for the rest of your playthrough. Like me. No, not me. Me. Anyway, Me is a new character that again isn't from the novel, but still has quite the tragic and also slightly hilarious backstory that there is way more to than I was expecting, spanning several journal entries across several different Yaoguai enemies. According to the lore, he was originally from the kingdom of Jusa and was the son of a silk weaver, although why there even were any other weavers living there is beyond me, since the Ju family of the Royal Weaving Office had quite the market cap on silk, creating the most coveted silk around, known as the Celestial Silk, which rumor had it was only able to be made by use of a jade shuttle. And I don't mean airport shuttle, I mean weaving shuttle. And points to you if you already knew what a weaving shuttle was before this video. I mean, I had to look it up. Anyway, Me's father thought to himself that if he were to just be able to take this jade shuttle for himself, he might be able to instead create the majestic Celestial Silk, and therefore he and his family would be rich beyond their wildest dreams. So one night, he sneaked into the Ju workshop, which was huge, and in the middle of the drying racks, stumbled upon the aforementioned jade shuttle. It was emitting a bright pillar of light, which turned out to be countless strands of silk stretching upward into heaven. and at the base of it was being passed back and forth between two clawed cocoon Yao Guais as they weaved the celestial silk into being using the Jade Shuttle. Mi's father approached the scene in a daze, wanting to steal the shuttle for himself, but upon approaching got a bit too close and was stabbed and killed by one of the claws in the claw cocoons, after which he was carried off by worms into the Pillar of Light and made into a cocoon himself, which also implies that the strands of silk are actually webs. The man's body was never found, which led to many believing that he had gone off to marry into the Jew family for their wealth. This sent the wife into a depression and their son, Mi, into a vengeful rage, swearing vengeance for his father even though he was still but a boy. Years later, he heard talk of the Jew estate being inhabited by women of unearthly beauty, which reminded him that one of those pretty unearthly ladies probably stole his dad away and probably also killed him maybe. So he set off to take his vengeance against them, but immediately was captured by the insect Yao Guais in the area. However, a little girl around the age of 10 showed up and commanded them to stop, which they obeyed immediately. This little girl is the youngest daughter of the Violet Spider and is known in-game as the sixth sister. She didn't have any friends to play with and immediately saw a potential playmate in Mi, bringing him with her into the Webbed Hollow, where normally mortals weren't allowed, where he stayed for many days, happily playing with his new friend by day and reciting his vows of vengeance against the Jew family for the capture and/or murder of his father by night. One day, his quite literal spoken vows of vengeance that he quite literally spoke aloud were overheard by a wasp guai, who reported it back to the second sister, who appeared in the sixth sister's stead the next day with an entourage of insect guais. They searched Mi's stuff and indeed found a dagger hidden inside his pillow, which pretty much all but proved that he was planning on killing the ladies at some point. The second sister claimed that he should be grateful they even let him live since humans were not allowed in the Webbed Hollow, and since he was plotting to commit death upon herself and her sisters and mother, he would have to be punished. However, she also understood his reason for seeking vengeance and thus decided to leave his fate up to a pit known as the Bone Vault, into which she had him cast immediately. Now you might think she was showing mercy by doing this, but then you realize that the Bone Vault is called the Bone Vault because it's filled with human bones that have been feasted upon by giant centipedes, an enormous one of which they dropped into the vault after Mi had been placed there, which is actually another boss in the game known as the Centipede Guai, and its lore is that it's a big centipede guai that gets killed by the Destined One. Anyway, Mi was far too crafty to be eaten by the centipedes, and I kid you not, escaped death by integrating into centipede society. No, I did not stutter. Yes, this is hilarious. He literally crawled and slithered around, copying centipede behaviors for 10 days until he finally managed to escape the Webbed Hollow, after which he returned to his home in relief, just kind of happy to be alive, revoking his vow of vengeance and instead electing to live out life in a peaceful existence. But his woes were not over, far from it. The other Weavers, seeing that he infiltrated and successfully escaped the Webbed Hollow alive, came to his home and demanded that he lead them inside so that they could all storm the Jew estate and take what should rightfully be theirs, as in the Jade Shuttle, so that they could all be rich. Even his mother couldn't understand why he wouldn't take some help with him in return, at the very least to avenge his father. So reluctantly, he re-vowed vengeance and re-entered the Webbed Hollow, where the second sister killed every single one of the Weavers except for Mi, who recognized her and began groveling for his life. This time around, though, she legitimately did show mercy and felt bad for him and therefore did not kill him, instead scolding him harshly and telling him to leave and never return. At this point, even the insect guais took pity on poor Mi, who aimlessly wandered around, eventually stopping at a nearby abandoned village. The insect guais approached him and told him to go see the 100-eyed Daoist master in the Temple of Yellow Flowers to find some purpose for his life, which he did since he really didn't know what else to do. The master was open to receiving Mi, but told him that he would have to wear a stone mask like all the other Daoists and shirk off all his worldly connections and aspirations, which caused Mi to hesitate and once again wander around the temple. While he was wandering around though, he saw the entire Jew family of mother and daughters show up and meet the master, after which they began feasting on human flesh since they're, Yao Guais. The Daoist then noticed that Mi was watching and getting nauseated seeing all the human flesh and told Mi that mortal lives are futile anyway, and it is therefore therefore natural for immortal Yao Guais to feast upon their flesh. This caused me to officially completely rethink his entire life's decisions, such as how he even found himself to be in this predicament in the first place. He also knew that if he didn't become a Yao Guai soon, being human, his fellows which would become Yao Guais would probably end up eating him. So at the end of his rope, he decided, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna go all the way with this and become not only a Daoist of the Temple of Yellow Flowers, but also a Yao Guai, and as quickly as possible too. He then asked the master how to do this, to which the master replied by telling him of the eggs of the armor worm that he could eat to become a Yao Guai. After this point, Mi decides to harvest the armor worm eggs that his fellow Daoists have consumed, but can't bring himself to do it, which is why he asks the Destined One to do it in his stead. After which the Destined One does indeed kill a bunch of his Daoist friends and brings him a clump of armorworm larvae that he found in their stomachs, which Mi happily consumes, then transforms into a worm Guai, then is killed by the Destined One. And so ends the tragic and slightly hilarious tale of Mi. Next up is another Daoist known as the Venom Daoist, who's the next brother in the line of brothers sent out to face the Destined One at the request of Erlang Shen. And just like all the others, please stay tuned for the Chapter 6 explanation video, which will cover the sacred divinity in much more detail, and which I promise you I will release before the year 2030. Maybe. But for the time being, I will say that the Venom Daoist took his job a little too seriously, eventually even thinking that he knew better than Erlang himself. He went off to the Temple of Yellow Flowers in order to test the Destined One, just like Erlang asked, but once there, decided to try to become stronger and train under the 100-eyed Daoist master, who apparently kept the Venom Daoist there for over 100 years, before finally convincing the Venom Daoist to undergo a transformation and sprout other arms. Yeah, the 100-eyed master definitely has a thing for turning people into insects, which we'll get into more later. Anyway, after this, the Destined One encounters the Venom Daoist while he's still in his transformation cocoon. After breaking out, the two fight twice, once in the Webbed Hollow and once in the Temple of Yellow Flowers. And in the second encounter, the Venom Daoist sees that he never needed the additional arms, and the 100-eyed Daoist master made him evolve and essentially waste 100 years of training, after which he is killed by the Destined One, and just before passing away tells us of the Golden Needle relic atop the Purple Cloud Mountain, which is this chapter's secret area where Daoist Mi is also found. Speaking of the Purple Cloud Mountain though, that leads us to our next boss, the Scorpion Lord, which both does and does not have ties to the original novel. In chapter 55 of The Journey to the West, after narrowly escaping a horrifying marriage to the very kind and nice and wealthy queen of the West Lung Kingdom of Women, Monk Sunzong was stolen away by another female Yao Guai that was actually the Scorpion Queen, known as the Guai of Desire. She's not a boss in the game, but I'm gonna tell you about her anyway because I feel like it. Her nearby abode was also a female-ruled kingdom called the Mountain of Venom, and as its queen, she took herself on many male suitors, practicing the Tao of concentration in the bedroom, which means exactly what you think it does. She repeatedly tried to use this Tao to make Sunzong her own, which he refused all night long, and even successfully defeated Sun Wukong and Zhu Bajia in combat multiple times by using her secret stinger technique called the Death Sting, which caused them both immense pain, but eventually was defeated by a constellation immortal summoned by Wukong known as the Star God Orionis, also known as the Dawn Star, also known as the Dusk Veil, which is another boss we'll get to later on in the video. After which Zhu Bajia literally beat her to a bloody pulp in a fit of rage because of her painful sting, which he got on his limp. Ouch. Anyway, apparently because she had countless male suitors in her time, she was naturally very picky and only chose the most manly, most muscular, most masculine, and most well-endowed in the bedroom as her partners. Among all her suitors, one stood out as the most strong and capable, and his name is the Scorpion Lord. She favored him and his skills so much that she decided he would have the honor of providing her with an heir, which he was more than happy to help her out with, but unfortunately for him, all of his children with her were born male. Since he obviously was unable to provide her with a daughter, which is the only kind of heir she wanted, he eventually fell out of grace with her and was no longer allowed to Smash. But since after all he was the guy that the Gwai of Desire wanted children with, he didn't exactly struggle for finding self-esteem, and thus he confidently left her mountain and took his 4 sons with him. After Wukong and co made mashed potatoes out of the Scorpion Queen, the Monkey King also set her place of dwelling on fire, and sensing the fire, the Scorpion Lord returned only to find her, made into mashed potatoes. He vowed to avenge her, and fortunately for him, he had picked up on a few of her moves, such as her death sting, even though he wasn't nearly as good at it as she was. He tried to roll the mountain of venom in her stead, but ended up running it into the ground and soiling its reputation, even losing all of his money in the meantime, after which he abandoned the mountain altogether and headed off to the Webbed Hollow, where he tried to get his sons, the Scorpion Princes, to marry the Violet Spider's daughters and further not only his line but the line of the deceased Scorpion Queen, who he still loved. Unfortunately though, even this proved unfruitful for the Scorpion Lord, since none of his sons were able to riz up any one of the Jew daughters, and as such were not taken seriously at all, and because of this he wasted away his days drinking alone near the Purple Cloud Mountain, trying to summon up the courage to face his beloved Scorpion Queen's killer, the immortal now known as the Duskvale, who was the last boss of Purple Cloud Mountain. The Scorpion Lord will appear in the fight against the Duskvale as vengeance for the Scorpion Queen, but the Destined One can also encounter and kill the Scorpion Lord before encountering the Duskvale, preventing him from trying to seek revenge. Not that he would be able to get it anyway, since he just dies immediately in the second phase. The Duskvale, like I mentioned earlier, used to be a star god referred to as the Dawn Star, and who is the very same Dawn Star that Kung Jin's star went looking for in the previous chapter. His actual form is that of a divine double-combed rooster with a crow so powerful that it literally killed the Scorpion Queen instantly. Anyway, his backstory is where things start to take a darker turn, and by taking a closer look, we can start to see the larger shady business narrative that's been going on behind the scenes in the Webbed Hollow. Orionis is the son of another immortal known as the Bodhisattva Pilanpo, and was originally stationed in the East Heaven by the decree of the Jade Emperor himself. In the novel, he helped the heroes against both the Hundred-Eyed Daoist Master and the Scorpion Queen. In the case of Mr. Hundred Eyes, Orionis' mother, Bodhisattva Pilanpo, assists Wukong by using a magical golden needle, the same needle that's referred to as the Weaver's Needle in-game, which was created in the eyes of her son, the Star-Lord Orionis. The needle was used to defeat the Hundred-Eyed Daoist in the novel, which is a story we'll get to in just a bit. And as for the Scorpion Queen, the Star-Lord straight up just transformed into his rooster form and crowed twice at her, killing her, then reascended back into the Eastern Heaven, never to be mentioned again in the book. The next thing we know of him is in the game, where for some reason he decided to leave the heavens above and ended up going back down into the mortal world below to the top of Purple Cloud Mountain, where he was murdered by an insect Gwai using the Weaver's Needle. There's no confirmed explanation for specifically why he left heaven, but with some of the other clues in the game we have regarding his mother and the aforementioned shady business of the Webbed Hollow, such as the fact that he left quietly and was replaced quietly by another Dawn Star, who was not allowed to ask questions about the previous Dawn Star, which is extremely suspicious. Here's what I personally think transpired, and be sure to let me know if you think differently in the comments below, but it's related to his mother actually. See, in the novel, the last thing we know about Pilanpo is that after the fight involving the Hundred-Eyed Daoist, she took the Daoist back with her to the Purple Cloud Mountain where she dwelt, tasking the defeated Centipede Man with essentially being her gatekeeper, which is the last thing we hear of either of them. Then in the game, not only is her Purple Cloud Mountain completely absent of any trace of her, but it's also the location of her monstrously transformed son, the Duskvale. At the same time, the previously captured Hundred-Eyed Daoist has been freed and regained power following the defeat of Wukong, oddly showing up with 2 arms of a divine being, referred to as the Buddha's right and Buddha's left hands. On another note, both of these arms had armorworm eggs inserted inside them and transformed into insect Yaoguais, one of which we fight in the game as the Yaoguai chief Buddha's right hand, and the other of which was swallowed by the frog boss of the area, Ba Ligoba. They used to act together to lure prey though, by dangling their arms down and clapping to kill things that they would then eat. And we know these weren't Wukong's arms, since his arms are iron according to the novel, and his body was given as a relic to the Bull King. So the question remains, whose divine arms are they? Well, it's very possible, probable even, that after Wukong's defeat, the Hundred-Eyed Daoist was given his Envious Tongue relic, and used its power to actually kill his former master, the Bodhisattva Pilanpo, Pilanpo and claim her weaver's needle as his own. The death of his mother is probably what lured the Dawnstar down to the Purple Cloud Mountain, all according to the plan of the Hundred-Eyed Daoist, which ended up being a fatal mistake for the Star-Lord since the Hundred-Eyed Daoist was able to use his mother's needle to slit his throat, and then force him to ingest an armorworm larvae, transforming him from the Divine Rooster into the cursed Duskveil that we see in-game, possibly being used for ulterior motives that we'll get to later on, until he's finally put to rest at the hands of the Destined One. For whatever reason, the Hundred-Eyed Daoist saw the Duskveil transformation as a failure of sorts, and after this decided to cut off his mother's arms and transform them into Yaoguais, which was probably more of an experiment to him, but more on the why in just a bit. The Yaoguai arms being Pilanpo's is such a widely accepted theory that the wiki page even refers to the Buddha's right hand as the Bodhisattva's right hand, referencing the fact that Bodhisattva Pilanpo is a Bodhisattva, not a Buddha. However, this is not the only possibility as to whose arms they are. The right hand also drops the past echo mirror upon defeat, which is a magical mirror given to the immortal Queen Mother of the West by the Yellow Emperor that is said to be able to reflect the body's internal organs. The Queen Mother also dwells in her palace on the nearby Mount Kunlun, so she is another possibility for the arms, but I digress. The three bosses that are left, the Violet Spider, the Hundred-Eyed Daoist Master, and the possessed, temporarily evil Jubaja himself are all pretty interconnected, but it is by far the most emotional story of all the bosses in the game so far, and also the most blatantly different from the novel, as in it literally rewrites the events of the novel. But let's begin by talking about the origins of the little piggy himself. Originally, he was an immortal who was a marshal or admiral of the Celestial Court named Chanpeng. And he was said to be a handsome man. He was even given a mighty golden divine weapon called the Nine-Toothed Rake out of his service to the Jade Emperor. Eventually though, he was cast out of heaven as well as out of his celestial body into the mortal world, where he reincarnated as a monstrous man-eating pig guai. His new identity as a pig also fits his personality thematically, in that he does have a good heart somewhere, but is often plagued by his insatiable desires of the flesh, such as for food or for lust. In the novel, he was cast out of heaven because he drunkenly tried to force himself upon the goddess Chang'e at the Lotus Viewing Banquet and was reported by the Supreme Celestial Inspector and subsequently punished by the Jade Emperor as a result, being beaten 2,000 times with a mallet, then banished. In the game, we have some added details for this event in that one of Chang'e's maidens, a girl dressed in violet, offered Chanpeng a glass of wine while he was watching the live entertainment. He was so captivated by the white-clad celestial dancers that he took the cup without even acknowledging the violet girl's existence, but she definitely noticed him, and at some point in the evening might have even physically bumped into her while chasing after Chang'e, as we see in the animation, although this might just be figurative for their lives briefly coming into contact with one another. After the dancing concluded, Chanpeng found himself outside the gate where he witnessed a slammed drunken monkey, also known as one Sun Wukong, being carried past hurriedly, which caused him to think to himself, why don't I get drunk like that monkey? And is likely the very thought process that led to him eventually trying to force himself on Chang'e. Anyway, once he began his new life as a pig on Earth, he did indeed just live in a cave, eating whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted, until meeting Bodhisattva Guan Yin and her disciple Moxa, who he also tried to eat. The duo was on their way traveling to the east in order to find a monk for the journey to the west. Once the pig discovered who Guan Yin was, he immediately stopped attacking them and repented of his sins, after which Guan Yin proposed to him that in order to redeem himself for the sins of his past and current lives, he should become a vegetarian and no longer eat meat, especially human meat, and wait for the chosen traveling monk so that he can assist him on his journey to the west, to which the pig agreed. She then gave him the religious name Ju Wunong, which means the pig who is aware of ability. After their departure, Wunong settled with a farmer family named the family of Gao, the patriarch of which was old Mr. Gao, working for them for food and marrying their daughter whether she liked it or not. Sun Wukong initially met Wunong because he was told that there was a pig monster who abducted Mr. Gao's youngest daughter and locked her away, calling her his wife and refusing to allow her to see her family, which obviously Wukong decided to do something about. Long story short, he initially freed the girl while Wunong was out and about, and then then disguised himself as the girl once Wukong came home, having a bit of mischievous fun before revealing his true identity as the fearsome Sun Wukong, whose reputation as a fierce fighter preceded him. The two fought and flew around in the night, with Wukong having the upper hand until eventually Wukong discovered by asking Wukong some general questions that Wukong was a disciple of the monk Sanzang, journeying to the west for the scriptures of the Buddha. A light bulb went off in Wukong's head, and then he revealed and swore upon heaven that he was also tasked with the same thing by Guan Yin herself, after which Wukong led him back to meet the Gao family and Sanzang, which led to Wukong parting ways with his quote-unquote wife and joining Sanzang's group, officially receiving the new name from Sanzang, Ju Bajia, which means the pig of the 8 precepts, a reference to the 8 Buddhist precepts that are to be upheld by those seeking enlightenment. The group then continues on to many adventures as they journey west, but eventually their path crosses with a group of 7 female spider guys, which is another part of the novel that differs from the lore of the game. One of these spider guys is revealed in the game lore to be none other than the violet-clad girl from heaven herself, who once served Ju Bajia a glass of wine in their previous lives in heaven. She ended up falling in love with the heavenly admiral and even followed him down to the earth, where she was reincarnated as a spider Yaoguai, known as the Violet Spider, a Yaoguai queen in game. In the novel, the 7 spider sisters kidnap and attempt to consume Sanzang, but before they do so, they all decide to go bathe in the nearby spring, known as the Purgation Spring. Wukong, being a monkey of valor, is hesitant to attack them outright since they're, girls. So instead, he decides to craftily make them stay in the water by turning into a hawk and stealing all their clothes, forcing them to remain naked in the spring water while he returns to the posse to talk about how they're going to free their master. However, when Bajia heard that there were girls bathing without clothes nearby, he convinced Wukong that they still needed to be killed since, when it comes nightfall, they could still get out and come after them and try to kidnap Sanzang again or whatever. And when Wukong still refused to kill them, Bajia happily ran off to them, where he decided to have a little bit of fun. He got into the water with them, turned into a fish, and started swimming in between their legs, which is probably for the exact reason you're thinking. Now, in the game, it's a bit more romantic than this, and it's revealed that one of these spider sisters was the Violet Spider, and he swam right up to her because they both recognized each other. After which, they swim together and have a, quote, brief affair in the water, which led to the Violet Spider bearing Bajia's children later on. Anyway, according to the novel, his goofing around led to the sisters spinning him up in a web and running back away to their cave, where they tasked their adoptive sons, which were a bunch of other insect guys, with finishing off Sanzang's group while they clothed themselves and ran off to the nearby Temple of Yellow Flowers to see their fellow ex-student, who they called their older brother, a Daoist known as the Hundred-Eyed Daoist, who is also the final Yaoguai king boss of this chapter. Bajia eventually escaped his sticky situation and reunited with Wukong and co, who were able to defeat all of the insect guys and free Sanzang, after which they traveled to the Temple of the Yellow Flowers and met the Hundred-Eyed Dude himself, who didn't know who they were at first and immediately offered them some tea out of hospitality. However, the Spider Sisters, which were also there stealthily, unbeknownst to Wukong and co, sneakily pulled the Daoist aside and explained to him what happened, especially detailing what happened in the waters of Purgation Spring with a certain pig man. The Daoist was so angry at hearing this that it is said that his color changed and his voice became quivery, after which he told them that he would take care of the monk in his company, also wanting to eat the monk's flesh to become even more immortal himself. He devised a plan to poison the teacups, but just before he was able to serve all of them, Wukong became suspicious and refused to drink. The others drank their poisoned teas though, and long story short, once Wukong saw that the others were poisoned, it's at this point that he became enraged and tried to single-handedly kill all the Spider Sisters and the Hundred-Eyed Daoist himself in combat. Now this is yet another point at which the novel details a different story than the game does. In the book, Wukong ends up duplicating himself and capturing all of the Spider Sisters, offering the Daoist one opportunity to trade with him his people in exchange for his sisters, which the Daoist actually refuses to do, wanting to eat Sanzang's flesh for himself. This leads Wukong to beat all of the Spider Sisters to death in bloody pulps right in front of the Hundred-Eyed Daoist. However, according to the game lore, Wukong instead prevented any of his fellow travelers from ever being poisoned in the first place, and then sent Ju Bajia to kill the spiders in his stead as he fought against the Hundred-Eyed Daoist. Bajia Bajia was able to kill all the spiders, but when it came to the last one, the violet spider, he remembered their affair and decided to not kill her, but instead allow her to run away and live while simultaneously abandoning her. A guilt that still haunts him to this day, though he'll never admit it unless his mind is heavily altered. Meanwhile, in the novel, the 100-eyed Daoist then performs his secret move. He lifts up his arms and reveals the eyes on his ribs, which emit a blinding golden light, the same move that the Destined One fights against in the game. At this point, Wukong seeks out the help of Bodhisattva Pilanpo, who uses her weaver's needle to break through the golden beams and, like I mentioned earlier, then takes the 100-eyed Daoist back with her to serve as a gatekeeper on Purple Cloud Mountain. After Sun Tsung's group left the temple, neither the Daoist nor the Spider Sisters are ever mentioned again in the novel, so we only have the game lore to go off of going forward. As for the Violet Spider, who was a Yao Guai and could only eat meat, she was forced to live by consuming the corpses of her sisters, and eventually she gave birth to her children, fathered by the unknowing Ju Bajia. It's also possible that only her youngest daughter, the 6th sister, is Bajia's offspring, and she already had the other 5 before, but that's up to interpretation, and I personally don't think she had any children at the point of their affair in the water, but it also wouldn't make sense for her to have kids with other people and then randomly the 6th one with Bajia, who she had already mated with before having the other children, so to me it makes more sense that all of her children were fathered by Bajia, but that's besides the point. The 100-eyed Daoist was eventually freed from his position of labor under Bodhisattva Pilanpo when he was recruited by Erlong to help take down Wukong, after which he was given Wukong's Envious Tongue relic. He then returned to the Temple of Yellow Flowers, which neighbors the Webbed Hollow, and reunited with his younger sister, the Violet Spider, who at this point now had her own family consisting of 6 daughters, once again leading to 7 Spider Guais living in the Hollow. The Daoist then became involved with one of the darkest and most mysterious conspiracy theories involving Earth and Heaven that the game has to offer, and as a forewarning, much of what I'm going to be talking about going forward is going to be speculative since the game is very hush-hush about all these details. But at some point, the Daoist came in contact with a celestial individual known as the Crane Immortal, whose true name is never officially revealed to us in the game, although we can assume due to many different clues that he is a high-ranking official of Heaven, which we'll talk more about in just a second. It is most likely that the Crane Immortal is the one who gave the 100-eyed Daoist the corrupted eggs of the armor worms, which is what led to the Centipede Daoist becoming kind of obsessed with turning everyone into insect Yao Guais. But I know what you're thinking right about now. Turning people into bugs is all well and good, but why? What is the point of doing that? Was the Daoist just trying to amass a big bug army or something? Well, maybe, but once again, the specific reasons for his actions are shrouded in mystery. But I'm going to tell you what I think, and it's related to the fact that some internet users believe the true identity of the Daoist's master, the Crane Immortal, to be that of Taishang Laojun, known as Lao Tzu in real life, also known as the founder of Taoism. Lao Tzu in the novel is an incredibly high-ranking immortal in Heaven and is responsible for creating the elixirs and pills that extend longevity and immortality for the other immortals of Heaven. And in the game, it's implied that celestial beings actually need these pills in order to maintain their immortality. As a side note, Wukong once entered Lao Tzu's alchemical lab in Heaven and stole and consumed all of the immortal pills that Lao Tzu had created while he was elsewhere giving a lecture, granting himself essentially the entire immortality of Heaven as a result. Now in Chapter 4, there's an entire conspiracy side quest that lots of players miss out on involving the 4th sister and 4 very peculiar purple talismans that need to be removed in order to further this side quest. I won't go into too much detail regarding the 4th sister here since, like I mentioned earlier, all of the lore behind the sisters is more than enough for their own video and even details a romance between the 4th sister and Wukong. But in a nutshell, once the 4th talisman is removed, the Supreme Celestial Inspector, whose real name is Wang Lingwan, shows up and tries to kill the Destined One. But just before he can, the Crane Immortal also appears and stops him from doing so, because the Crane knows that the Destined One serves a different purpose related to the 100-eyed Daoist. He still scolds the Destined One for not heading straight to the Daoist like he was supposed to, and instead meddling with the affairs of the court and giving the 4th sister a false hope, after which he reveals that he transformed her into a golden pill, and threatens the Destined One to think about her if he decides to meddle with their affairs yet again in the next life. The two biggest takeaways from the scene are that Wang Lingguan, the supreme right hand of the Jade Emperor, whose head was literally turned into a right hand to signify just how much of a right hand he is to the Jade Emperor, who is so steadfastly devoted to the Jade Emperor that he's essentially a super cop that all of the other immortals and deities of heaven dare not to get too close to out of fear that they too will be reported for something, obeys and listens to the Crane Immortal. His journal entry details that other than his allegiance to the Jade Emperor, there is only one other old god of very high rank in the court that he is allied with, which is clearly a reference to the Crane Immortal that he obeys right in front of our eyes. Combine this with the fact that the Crane Immortal makes pills, and you've got yourself the biggest evidence for believing that the Crane is none other than the old god of very high rank, Lao Tzu himself. But remember, that's just a theory, and is not confirmed anywhere, and the Crane Immortal's true identity still could be somebody else. And if you have a guess, please let us know in the comments below. But to tie all of this back to the 100-Eyed Daoist, according to the Daoist's journal entry, he answers directly to the Crane Immortal and is supposed to be accomplishing some sort of a task for the Crane. What exactly this task is and the nature of their partnership are yet again details left completely up to speculation, with lots of people believing that this is going to be what the DLC will delve into and explore more of when it releases early next year. But one possibility is that the Crane is using the immortal Yao Guais that the Daoist is creating with the armorworm eggs that the Crane provided the Daoist with in order to turn them into pills, an immortal pill form, if you will, under the disguise of the Ju family silk production, which is why the corpses of people like Mi's father are taken and turned into Yao Guais, inside the strands of silk leading to heaven. This could also be why the Duskvale was transformed at the very top of Purple Cloud Mountain, where there are strands reaching far upward into the heavens above, a very particular detail, which means that it's possible the Duskvale was also being used to create pills. Being such a powerful constellation immortal, you would think his pills are incredibly potent. On the other hand, we also have reason to believe that the Daoist was planning to rebel against the Heavenly Court. The Crane seems to underestimate, yet have some knowledge of the Daoist's little schemes, and in the fight against the Centipede Daoist, he blatantly claims that he is trying to free himself of Kunlun's reign, or in other words, of heaven, by using the powerful relics of Wukong that he was planning on retrieving from the Destined One. His plan with the Violet Spider involved giving her both the Envious Tongue relic to empower her and apparently keep her alive, which is not expounded on in the game, and the Weaver's Needle so that she would lure, capture, and kill Zhu Bajia on the behalf of the 100-Eyed Daoist. The second sister did successfully stab Bajia's forehead with the needle, which caused him to become plagued with delusions and eventually even fight against the Destined One, speaking to him as if he were Wukong, claiming that he would not be forced to leave his spider lover again. The Destined One beats him senseless though, and then shows him the past echo mirror, which enables Bajia to snap out of his delusions and remove the needle from his forehead, after which he is captured yet again. The Violet Spider still loved Bajia though, and even though she did capture him twice, she couldn't bring herself to kill him, and because of this was defeated by the Destined One in combat, after which she fled to her older brother, the 100-Eyed Daoist, who was only mildly disappointed in her ability to kill Zhu Bajia since she still brought him the Destined One and therefore his actual target, 3 of Wukong's relics. He then tells her that her wound is getting worse, and knowing that the relic was the only thing keeping her alive, still goes forward with removing it from her, absorbing it along with the Violet Spider herself into his body, which literally transforms her and the relic into an ornate sword, after which all her daughters take offense and try to fight against the Daoist, but to no avail. Thankfully though, the Destined One once again uses the Weaver's Needle that has been crafted once more by the eyes of the Duskvale and defeats the 100-Eyed Daoist Master once and for all. After his death, the Violet Spider's body is retrieved but separated from the relic that was keeping her alive, which leads to her finally passing away, but not before gazing upon and calling out one last time to Zhu Bajia, claiming that he still hasn't changed one bit as he once again left her and his child behind. And as all of these emotions swell in Bajia, he looks upwards once more to heaven, realizes that he still has a job to do, and lets out a sigh. And that, my friends, wraps up the boss explanations for every Yao Guai chief and king and queen in the entire chapter. This was a bit more speculative than usual though, since chapter 4's lore is the most different from the novel and also the most unexplained. But I'm curious as to what you guys think. Did what we covered in this video line up, or is there something I missed? Let me know all about it in the comments below. Also, thank you so much for watching. The following videos will be releasing much quicker than they have been, trust me, so once again, make sure you're subscribed to stick around for the remaining chapter boss videos as well as dragon and spider lore videos, with many more to come. Also, please consider leaving a like if you enjoyed this video or at least my efforts into making it. Huge thanks as always to my bandit crew, who are the entire reason I can create these videos. That's all I've got for this one, so be sure to follow me on my socials for updates, and I'll see you next time. This is Bandit, signing out. Peace!
有你相伴着。